This week, two things happened almost back to back. Poland rolled brand new tanks toward its northeastern border, and the director of the CIA flew straight into Moscow. So which one actually matters, and which one is just timing? Let's take the stranger event first. In late August 2026, a U.S. Air Force transport plane touched down at a Moscow airport with the CIA director on board. By 2026, direct high-level contact between Washington and Moscow had become rare, most communication running through lower-level channels or third countries. That route alone is unusual. An American government aircraft flying from Washington to Moscow is a flight almost nobody takes anymore, not since relations between the two countries fell apart. So when it happens, it gets noticed, and people immediately start comparing it to the last time an American intelligence chief made that exact trip. That was William Burns in Moscow on November 2nd, 2021. He was there, by his own later account, to warn the Kremlin about the consequences of invading Ukraine. That warning wasn't Burns acting alone either. Other U.S. officials were telling European allies the same thing that autumn, that an invasion looked increasingly likely. 3.5 months later, on February 24th, 2022, that invasion began anyway. The warning didn't stop the outcome, but the visit became the reference point everyone remembers. One thing needs to be untangled here, because it gets mixed up constantly. Burns also met Russia's spy chief Sergei Narishkin a year later, in November 2022. But that meeting happened in Ankara, in Turkey, not in Russia at all. It's a separate episode, a different year, a different country. Don't fold the two together. So the real precedent people are actually thinking of is the 2021 Moscow trip, the one that came right before troops started massing on Ukraine's border. That autumn, satellite images showed Russian forces gathering near the frontier for months, long before anyone officially called it an invasion. That's the parallel being drawn now, in 2026. Not proof that history is repeating, just a pattern that once came before something enormous. So what does a CIA director actually do on a trip like this? He isn't a diplomat, and he isn't there to sign anything. Intelligence chiefs exist for exactly this situation. A direct, quiet line between two governments when the normal diplomatic channels are frozen or nearly gone. It lets both sides pass a message without a press conference, without a treaty, and without either government committing to a single thing in public. So a visit like this is not a negotiation, and Moscow said as much. It is also not an ultimatum. It is a channel, and that's all that's been confirmed. Here's the honest part too. Nobody outside that room knows what was actually said. No leaked transcript, no anonymous source worth repeating. Just the fact that the flight happened. Visits like this aren't without precedent either. Even during the Cold War, American and Soviet intelligence chiefs kept occasional direct contact, precisely because normal diplomacy sometimes breaks down. Both governments did confirm this latest meeting took place. Neither one released details about what was discussed, and that silence is normal for this kind of contact. Even after the war started, CIA and Russian intelligence contacts didn't fully stop. They've handled things like prisoner exchanges in the years since. Treat the visit for exactly what's confirmed. A real flight, a real meeting, and a conversation nobody outside it has described. Now, the other half of the week. Poland has been rebuilding its army for years, and a large share of that rebuild is coming from South Korea, not from Western Europe. Warsaw signed its first big contract for K2 tanks and K9 howitzers back in 2022, and deliveries have arrived in scheduled batches ever since. Here's the actual timeline of that deal. The first 10 K2 tanks actually reached Poland within about 4 months of signing. arriving before the end of 2022. Since then, the deliveries have kept coming in waves. Hundreds of tanks and howitzers arriving in stages, spread across years. Not delivered all at once. Poland already spends more of its GDP on defense than any other NATO country, over 4%, and has for a couple of years now. So this newest shipment isn't a sudden decision made this week. It's one more delivery on a schedule that was locked in years earlier. Here is that shipment, a tank being lowered off a transport at night, right near the border with the Kaliningrad region. What's new isn't the tank itself. It's where Poland is choosing to station it, right on its northeastern edge of the country. That edge faces Kaliningrad, a Russian territory wedged between Poland and Lithuania, cut off by hundreds of miles from mainland Russia. Kaliningrad shares a land border with Poland on one side and Lithuania on the other, and it hosts Russia's Baltic Fleet, along with long-range missile units. Kaliningrad wasn't always Russian either. It was German Königsberg until the end of World War II, when it became Soviet territory and stayed that way. Right beside it sits the piece of ground this entire story actually revolves around. And it isn't a city or a weapon. It's a strip of land. It's called the Suwalki Corridor, or the Suwalki Gap. And geography, not politics, is the reason it matters this much. This narrow strip is the whole story. The corridor is named after the nearby Polish town of Suwalki, sitting where northeastern Poland meets southwestern Lithuania. 65 kilometers is nothing on a map of Europe, but it happens to be the only road and rail corridor connecting 3 NATO countries to the rest of the alliance by land. Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia all sit on the far side of that gap. Every other overland route to them runs through Belarus, which isn't an option. So if that corridor were ever severed, all 3 Baltic states would only be reachable by NATO, through the sea or through the air. Nothing over land at all. The corridor isn't just narrow. It also runs roughly 100 kilometers along the Poland-Lithuania border. All of it flat and exposed. Cut that link, and you're not just isolating land. You're isolating close to 6 million people living in Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia from the rest of their own alliance. That single fact is why this stretch of farmland and forest gets more attention from NATO planners than almost anywhere else on the continent. NATO has run entire military exercises just to practice defending this one stretch of ground, because losing it would cut the Baltics off overland instantly. It's also exactly why Poland is putting new armor on its northeast right now, an area that also borders Belarus, adding another layer to the buildup. Put the 2 stories side by side, and the difference is obvious. One story is Poland finishing a delivery schedule it signed years earlier, aimed at ground that has worried NATO planners for a decade already. The other is a rare flight to Moscow, echoing a moment from 2021 that came before a war nobody had announced in advance. Both of this week's stories are getting more attention simply because the whole region already sits under a brighter spotlight than it did 2 years ago. None of that spotlight comes from this one flight or this one shipment alone. It's built up from years of tension across the whole eastern edge of NATO. It's worth remembering, too, that neither government has said this visit or this shipment is a response to the other. Both are being read that way mostly because they happen to share a headline. So here's the direct answer. The tanks and the flight are not one connected story. They come out of 2 completely different timelines that just happen to land in the same week. Poland's armor is a long-planned reinforcement of ground that has mattered since long before this year began. The CIA visit is a separate, older style of signal, revived because the moment calls for it. What ties them together isn't a plan. It's the calendar. Both are unfolding while tension along NATO's eastern edge is already high. So they read as linked even without one causing the other. So when you hear both stories break in the same week, the timing feels loaded, even though the two tracks were laid down separately, years apart. None of this means a war has been decided, scheduled, or become unavoidable. Not from a tank shipment, and not from a single flight. Nobody credible is claiming that, and this video isn't claiming it either. That's the full picture. A rare diplomatic flight with real historical echoes, and a tank shipment that was scheduled long before this particular week. What's genuinely unknown is simple. What exact words were exchanged inside that Moscow meeting, and how long Poland's buildup on its northeast will keep going? Both stay open questions. So which of these two stories feels bigger to you? The quiet flight to Moscow, or the tanks heading toward Kaliningrad? Put your answer in the comments below.